Well, something big about to happen in Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin was rushed to the Kremlin late last night for an emergency meeting of some kind, according to our next guest. So did that emergency meeting have anything to do with this? Reports this morning circling that Russian forces are aware of the 101st Airborne Division from the United States side and French troops now openly operating in Odessa. This is a separate report that U.S. Congress effectively declaring war on Saturday night with their big vote in the House of Representatives. So we got a couple of pieces that we want to bring in Colonel Douglas MacGregor to get his analysis on. Colonel, your reporting on this is that, first of all, on the Putin piece, you can confirm that he was rushed to the Kremlin late last night. Can you tell us more about that? And then we'll talk about the troops piece.
No, I wish that I could. I mean, I've been able to confirm through multiple sources that he was rushed to the Kremlin in the middle of the night or early in the morning last night. Why? I have no idea. It was linked, obviously, to this report of U.S. and French troops in Odessa. However, Russians on the ground in Odessa have reported categorically that they have not seen any French or U.S. troops in the city or outside of the city.
Now, if this is 101st Airborne Division, we know the best of the best. Would you see them walking down the street? Or would they be invisible, and that's why this report is credible? I mean, on the troops side, we don't know, and maybe we're conflating the two things. We don't know if they're related at all, right?
Well, the French forces are, whatever they are, they're probably Foreign Legion. They may have some mobile armored elements, but they are largely infantry. The same thing would be true for the 101st Air Mobile. We call it the Airborne Division because of World War II, but it's really a helicopter-borne infantry. They haven't left Romania as far as we can tell. So, I think that report is false. Now, does that mean that they're not going to do so or it's not under consideration? We have Biden's promise that there will be no U.S. boots on the ground in Ukraine. But we know we've had lots of U.S. military and intelligence personnel on the ground. They simply haven't been organized into units. If we were to do this and the French were to do so with us, we would end up at war with Russia. So it's an absurdly ridiculous idea. And one wonders what they're trying to accomplish by going into the port city of Odessa. The port's easily blocked, easily mined from the sea approach. And then you're sitting ostensibly on Russia's doorstep. It can move forward and position all of its rocket artillery and tube artillery to utterly pulverize and flatten any of the areas where we might decide to establish ourselves. It's a very dumb idea, Clayton. It's incomprehensible to me that anybody would be that stupid, but I've been wrong a lot lately on that topic.
I guess a lot of your analysis in the world doesn't account for stupid. Maybe we need to have a stupid index to look at this. Going through Russian media, I can't find any information at all about Putin having been rushed to the Kremlin. So this is interesting. The Russian, if this was some sort of emergency on the Russian side, that you might see it all over Russian media. It seems like it's been very, very quiet. So something seems to be happening here. We don't know, as you said, what's going on here to speculate. But do you think that this is tied in any way to this massive new tranche of money, which was passed on Saturday night by the House of Representatives, which, by the way, one of the most disgusting things I think I've ever seen, to see that the House of Representatives, after they passed this massive multi-billion-dollar funding package for Ukraine, grab Ukrainian flags and wave them cheering for Ukraine on the floor of the House of Representatives. I was really bothered by that. Personally, not to editorialize, but I really was bothered by that. While southern border is wide open, 10 cities across the United States, crime rampant, and we're celebrating funding Ukraine. Anyway, do you think that this emergency meeting at the Kremlin has anything to do with this massive tranche of money flowing in?
No, I don't think so, because the Russians have learned how our system works, and this money, most of it, is a gift to donors and people inside the United States who have an interest in defense. Now, what do I mean by that? Most of the money will never reach Ukraine. It will be used to replenish existing stocks that have now been emptied into Ukrainian hands. It will pay for things that have yet to be produced by assembly lines. So I don't think the Russians are particularly worried about that. I think that this is another demonstration of the loyalty and fealty of many, many members, to most members, frankly, to their donors. They're waving whatever flag the donor tells them to. And, keep in mind, most of these people on the Hill, they don't know anything about Russia. They know nothing about Ukraine or Eastern Europe. These are all domestic politicians that'll do whatever they think it takes to get reelected. There were only 21 members of the House that voted against the massive funding bill for both, over $90 billion for both Ukraine, Israel, and obviously Taiwan. And they did so because they said, until we've closed our borders and addressed our national security needs and restored the rule of law here at home, we're not sending any more money overseas. And of course, that makes infinite sense. But there were only 21. So I think if you can turn to your research staff, if you've got one, and put them to work to find out who's paying each of these individuals that voted for the bill what. I'm sure they have all been richly rewarded for their support.
Absolutely.
I remember just a few years ago when President Obama was in power, that Senator Tom Cotton crafted a letter arguing essentially for war with Ukraine, or excuse me, war with Iran. In other words, it was one of these letters that said we need to be more hostile and aggressive towards Iran. Sanctions aren't enough. We need to directly attack them and so forth. He ended up receiving, the day after he circulated that letter, had it signed and brought it to the White House, he ended up receiving $1 million from Bill Kristol's Israeli fund. So I think it's pretty obvious how this works. You say the right things, vote for the right way, and you're going to be wealthy. The problem is it doesn't do us any good. So I think we have a Congress that sort of lives on the Washington version of Epstein Island. It's fantasy world, and they're no longer connected seriously to the people that they were elected to represent, because I doubt seriously that if you polled the American people, that anybody was rushing to volunteer to fight in Ukraine or the Middle East. I don't see it. And the notion of fighting on Taiwan, that's absurd.
I'll ask our audience who are watching us, tonight here on the show, do you guys think it's appropriate for Americans to go fight in Ukraine and die in Ukraine, go fight in Israel, die in Israel, go fight in Taiwan and die in Taiwan? Or, by the way, just even fund those particular wars? I mean, the polling shows, Colonel, over 70% of Americans say absolutely not. So you have a Congress that is absolutely out of touch with the American people on purpose. On purpose.
Yes.
This is not something that they're doing blindly. But as the Financial Times reports today, Ukrainians believe $61 billion in U.S. aid won't stop Russia. They know it's not going to stop anything. This is the front page of the Financial Times. So then, as you point out, where's this money going to go? It's going to go to funnel to military-industrial complex. It's going to be stolen, as William Burns, the head of the CIA, warned Zelensky back in January, stop stealing our money. So we know that this is just flushing this money down the toilets. But yes, we see, Colonel, all of these trenches being built. And all of these, like, brand new. It's on, they went to Home Depot, got all sorts of nice fencing, all new, garden posts and plywood, and they're building all of these massive trenches now, and fortifications. So is that what we're looking at? We're looking at a return to like World War I trench warfare for the next couple of years with all this money?
Well, I'm sure that that's what the Ukrainian government, the current one under Zelensky, wants. But there are a couple of problems. First of all, digging trenches is very easy. They have entrenching machines. They're really quite marvelous. And I'm sure if we resurrected the armies of the First World War and showed them these machines, they would be absolutely astounded, because, we used to have to dig those ourselves. So these machines are able to cross fields in the space of 30 minutes and dig trenches that will accommodate whatever equipment you want to put in them or whatever soldiers you want to put in them. They can rapidly be reinforced by pouring concrete. So this is easy to do. The problem is, who are the Ukrainian soldiers that will fill these trenches? Or is there an expectation that NATO troops will come and fill these trenches? I don't see the Ukrainian soldiers doing it. I mean, last week, the Azov, one of the Azov units, this was a battalion strength organization. Probably at one time it was brigade strength, much larger, but it probably had 2,000 people plus in it. a reinforced battalion, and they were the so-called neo-Nazi fanatics that were devoted to the regime. The unit refused to fight. Simply said, we're not attacking. We won't do it. We're not prepared to all die in another pointless attack. In other cases, vast numbers of Ukrainian troops have simply said, that's it. We're going to surrender. And the Russians have been broadcasting very effective surrender appeals. And they know from having talked to their comrades that have come back from Russia that were captured years ago that they were well treated. So they know that the Russians will not abuse them. They will be processed. They will be fed. If they're injured, they will receive medical treatment. And then they will be escorted to a containment facility by the people that captured them. The Russians have handled this extremely well. You know, all these lies about Russian atrocities may have impressed people in the West, but there's never been the evidence for it on the battlefield. And the Ukrainians know that. So I think this war is very definitely at the end. So unless we have a ghost army that's going to be resurrected from the death sentence that they received from Zelensky, I don't see anybody filling those trenches. Now, again, going back to the NATO bit, we have said, and the Germans have said, that we will not send our forces. Now, we've heard Biden say that he wouldn't do a lot of things and then turn around, backtrack, and do them anyway. So it's not impossible that, you know, we could still be that foolish and stupid as to send troops in there. I wouldn't exclude that. But right now, it's basically the Lithuanians, the Poles, the Romanians, and I think the French and potentially the British. But again, what do they propose to do if they actually go there? There are 72,000 troops in the British Army. There are 120,000 troops in the French Army. If we sent all of them, they wouldn't make a dent in the Russian forces that are deployed right now in Ukraine that number over 800,000. There's no chance for these forces to have any impact at all. But they could start a major war. And again, this puts us back on track for two major wars that could escalate to the nuclear level, one in Eastern Europe and one in the Middle East. Take your pick. You would think any sane administration would be interested in de-escalating and disengaging as much as possible from that potential, but we haven't seen it.
Yet the Wall Street Journal out with a front page story over the weekend saying the Biden administration has been scrambling. In fact, running, I think was the word they used, running behind the scenes to really calm tensions in the Middle East and really trying to talk the Israelis down from attacking Iran and trying to tamp down the pressure there. Those were the words that were used in the Wall Street Journal. The Biden administration is going out of its way, running to stop the Israelis from going to war with Iran.
Well, I don't doubt that there's a certain amount of panic in the White House behind the scenes because they're not in control. They've surrendered control to Netanyahu in the Middle East. And NATO is essentially a battleship with no one on the bridge and engines that don't power the ship anymore. It's adrift. So on one hand, the NATO alliance is really adrift. I mean, can you imagine stupid comments like the ones coming out of Macron happening under previous presidents? No French president would have committed himself or his nation to fight somewhere as part of the NATO alliance without clearing that through Washington. We're not in control. Biden is not in control. I don't know who's making the decisions behind his back. He's simply being handed things to read. But the point is, in the Middle East, Mr. Netanyahu remains in control, and he's got a real problem. You know, Gaza is a catastrophe. It's failed miserably. They have not won in Gaza. We know that. He wants to go back in and finish up in Rafah. How many men, women, and children that have nothing to do with Hamas will die in that enterprise? It's anybody's guess. And Iran, I think, has demonstrated that if it's attacked by Israel, it has the capacity with pinpoint accuracy to eliminate most of what Israel considers important to its strategic power. So Mr. Netanyahu is in a difficult position. We can't help him. All we can do is tell him to back down. He can't back down. Netanyahu has to escalate or he's finished. So I don't think we've seen the last of the Israeli-Iranian confrontation. I don't think we've seen the last of Rafah. I don't think we've even seen the beginnings of what could happen in the region, because if anything, we're seeing more and more and more solidarity across national lines inside the Muslim world. The Turks, thanks to the last election, signaled their complete disgust with Mr. Erdogan's failure to engage seriously against Israel on behalf of the Palestinians. I think that Mr. Sisi, or General Sisi, is worried about his future. And I know that King Abdullah right now is on very shaky ground because he was foolish enough to cast his lot with us and help to defend Israeli airspace. Incomprehensible to millions of his own subjects who are watching their brothers on the other side be murdered. So the world has turned against Israel. We are increasingly isolated, but we have very little control. We are now, unfortunately, like the man that borrowed very heavily from the bank and at some point borrows so much that he owns the bank. Mr. Netanyahu owns us. What do we do?
It's a great question. I mean, I'll get you out of here on this, Colonel. When you look at what the United States is about to do as we head into this election year, it seems like there's a uniparty, of course, that you've been talking about. We've been covering on this show. They're in solidarity in the United States Congress, and they're passing billions of dollars in packages. They're not securing the southern border. You have a Speaker of the House, a Republican, it seems by name, who has repeatedly said border, 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 and then completely abandoned the U.S. southern border. So it seems like they are in solidarity with this movement and the support of Netanyahu and in Ukraine. What do you think that Putin is going to do here in the next? You talked about shoring up the ground once the ground becomes solid, lack of snow, rain. What do you think is going to happen in these next few weeks in Ukraine?
I think that the Russian forces will advance at numerous points along the line up to the Dnieper River. They will make a decision then where they want to cross, but I still am firmly convinced that after Kharkov falls into Russian hands, which is going to happen very soon, I think, they will then cross the river and turn south and take Odessa. And there is nothing the Ukrainians can do to stop them. They simply don't have the forces. And they have numerous opportunities to cross that river whenever they like. They've left most of the bridges intact. This was always their plan because they wanted to get to Odessa. Odessa is historically a Russian city. So we'll see. A Russian this morning contacted me through another friend and said that he sees no French or American troops in Odessa. I sincerely hope that that condition does not change. If it does, then I think the Russians will accelerate all of their movements and we will find ourselves at war with Russia unnecessarily. For what particular purpose? And again, no one expresses any interest in what's happened to the Ukrainian people. Ukrainians are exhausted. They're tired of this war. They've lost, now we think, 600,000 dead and another million or two wounded. Millions have left. The country is destroyed. It desperately needs peace. We should be thinking of that at this point, not of somehow or another, quote unquote, getting back at Mr. Putin, who's won. Remember, we can't let him win. Right. We've never had any option other than to accept his victory because, again, as we said from the very beginning, Ukraine had no more chance against Russia than Mexico would have against us in the United States. And right now, Odessa is analogous to Tijuana, just over the border from the United States. And you would think that the Russians would concentrate 20 or 30,000 troops there in a bid to threaten us? Of course not. It's absurd. It's nonsensical. We are being foolish and stupid on stilts.
I said I was going to get you out of here a second ago, but I have one more question as it relates to Donald Trump. Of course, you used to work for President Trump. And I was just kind of stunned over the weekend. I thought that, you mentioned 21 Republicans voted against this spending bill to Ukraine. Massive, massive amounts of money. And 21 Republicans said, no, we need to shore up our southern border. We can't do this. President Trump, he's not president, but he could have, as the leader of the Republican Party, come out and said, end this. No more money to Ukraine. This is ridiculous. And as Lindsey Graham said on Sunday's show, this bill would not have passed the House of Representatives with MAGA Mike Johnson had Donald Trump not been supportive of it.
This idea, give up on Ukraine makes the world safer. If you pull the plug on Ukraine because you don't have enough capability, there goes Taiwan. The Ukrainians are fighting like tigers. This aid package has a loan component to it. This would not have passed without Donald Trump. I want to thank the House Speaker and Hakeem Jeffries working together in a bipartisan fashion to give weapons to Ukraine to fight a fight that matters to us. And President Trump has created a loan component to this package that gives us leverage down the road.
What is your assessment? You used to work for President Trump. Could he have, I mean, did he fail on this, or was this a great success? I mean, where would you have advised him to come down on this funding for Ukraine and Israel?
Well, if I were working for him right now and he were president, I would have advised him under no circumstances to support the bill and instead focus our attention on the borders of the United States, restoring the rule of law. And if he went ahead and did what he did, which is essentially align himself with the money pigs in Washington, who are interested in everything other than the American people, I would have to resign. But I think Mr. Trump wants desperately to be president. And I think he sees becoming president as a vindication, since he truly believes that he won the last election. And to be quite frank with you, I tend to agree with him. That was not a fair and free election by any stretch of the imagination. And we're not about to have one anytime soon, because all of the same problems that existed back in 2020 still persist today. But I think he wants to be president. And so he is turning to everyone and anyone who has money willing to support him and will promise to do so, whatever they're asking. This is outrageous. I think it's terrible. I think he's made a bad mistake. And I agree with you. He should have stood with the 21 members, because quite frankly, most of America stands with those 21 members. Now, there were 37 members on the Democrat side who refused to support Israel and the money for Israel. That's another issue. And of course, it's toxic for all of the candidates. None of them want to be in the corner with the party that says Israel should stop killing people in Gaza. Anyone who suggests that is immediately branded as an enemy of Israel.
Right.
So it's a tough time to run for election. But the good news is Americans can look at what's happening right now, and they can find out who's really who.
Right.
You know, who is this man, Donald Trump? What did he do? He encouraged Speaker Johnson to do what he did. He congratulates him on doing a good job. This is catastrophically stupid. He's essentially throwing his principles overboard and his supporters under the bus.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how else to read it. I mean, and our viewers right now, if any of you watching right now are just, dyed in the wool Trump supporters, and no matter what presents itself, it doesn't matter to you. But this was to me, this rises to the level of coming out and supporting all the COVID vaccines that he did a few weeks ago and praising that. I think there was a lot of MAGA Republicans who said, wait a second, did Trump just praise COVID vaccine? Wait, did I hear that right? And now this weekend, supporting Speaker Johnson, supporting all of this money to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan. I just can't wrap my head around it. So I don't know what to make of it, but I was highly disappointed in this. And I think 70% of Americans said they absolutely don't want this. I think you're right. By supporting those 21 Republicans may have been a better, maybe smarter move. It's weird because in the same week, Colonel, he comes out and said, we've spent $7 to $9 trillion on boondoggle wars in the Middle East, where we've killed millions of people. And he said, we've got nothing from it. We have blood on our hands. We've got nothing but blood and misery. We should have never supported those wars. And then 4 days later, I just can't wrap my head around it. I don't know.
Remember, this is the same man who went on the campaign trail in 2016. And wherever he went, he heard millions of Americans chanting, build the wall, build the wall, build the wall. And what happened? He went after Obamacare. So we have to be realistic about this whole business. He's let a lot of people down, I think. I think it will come back to haunt him.
We'll have to see. Well, to hear you say, if you were working for him still in the Pentagon, that you would have submitted your resignation, those are very strong words. Colonel, great to see you as always. We'll be watching this very closely as this develops, but welcome to your election 2024. Colonel, thanks so much as always. Thanks, Colonel.
Same to you, Clayton. Bye-bye.
I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. You know, YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it. And we will see you next time, everyone.